to somehow communicate a message to my audience.
So picture this, 7th grade, swapping tapes with friends like it's some kind of underground ritual. That's how I found the Beastie Boys, licensed to ill, worn out playing it 200 times, hiding a Walkman inside our book bags when we weren't supposed to be listening. Then, one random day at a friend's house, I see it. I'm the Man on MTV, and my brain goes, what the hell is this? Screams, samples, scratches. I didn't even know what scratches were. And these were white dudes jumping around in Adidas. I didn't know whether to laugh, scream, or start skateboarding in the living room. I did all three. Next day, I stormed down to the local music store. This place was wild. Hip-hop, rap, a little metal chaos tucked in the back, patches for your jean jacket. I'm the Man cassette, EP, single, whatever. It's stacked with every version you could imagine. Live, censored, uncensored, a secret version, and had Sam Kinison singing naked. I'm not sure. And then boom. I hear I'm the Law, Caught in the Mosh, some Black Sabbath thrown in there. It wasn't just music. It was full-on collision of worlds. Metal guitars, comic book justice, chaos and order, all in my ears all at once. And the best part, I was already into comics. So now you've got this 7th grader standing in a record store like Indiana Jones in a vault of nerd dreams. Thrash metal blaring, comic books everywhere, and suddenly I'm living a crossover episode I didn't even know existed. I spent the next year obsessing, buying cassettes, buying comics, checking every corner store, every record store, every tape store, every comic book shop, going to conventions, getting lost in worlds where justice was fast, riffs were lethal, and where one guy could just patrol a mega city in a full Judge Dredd costume without HR complaints. Eventually I grew out of comics, not because they stopped being cool, I just stopped tracking the storylines. Stopped collecting like a crazy person, basically. But music never really left me, and the thing is, comics never really did either. They've been sneaking in, showing up in riffs, album art, concepts, even in my dreams. I'm even collecting them again. Before shared universes were billion-dollar IP, before post-credit scenes trained us to stay seated, metal bands were already building mythology. They just did it louder, and weirder, and funnier. Let's face it, half these guys were mutants. There was a time when album covers weren't just packaging, they were portals. There was a time when there was also only 6 channels on television. You didn't just buy a record, you bought into a world, a mascot, a monster, a recurring character. And if you were a comic kid, you recognized the language immediately. And if you were a metal kid, some of these characters already seemed familiar. Iron Maiden had Eddie, not just a logo, a character. Evolving, mutating, time traveling. Megadeth had Vic Rattlehead. Corporate dystopia before that was even trendy. Anthrax had the Not Man. Skate culture chaos colliding with thrash speed. These weren't marketing gimmicks. They were serialized mythology. Serialized mythology. You know, if they had a metal mascot cereal, I think that would do numbers. Comic books trained us to follow characters across issues. Metal trained us to follow them across albums. Different medium, same instinct. World building. Then you had bands like Kiss. They didn't just use comic aesthetics. They became living comic book characters. Face paint, personas, alter egos. You didn't go to a concert. You watched an origin story play out in real time. And that mascot era, that theatrical DNA, it didn't stay in the 80s. It bled forward. You can draw a straight line from Eddie to stage-driven lore bands today. The ones building universes, not just albums. Boo. The metal takeover had begun because Mascots were only the first crossover. Eventually, metal didn't just borrow from comics, it started writing them. To understand how metal and comics collided, start with the Mascots. Because Mascots were proto-comic characters. They just didn't have speech bubbles yet. Iron Maiden didn't just put a monster on an album cover. They built a recurring character. Eddie evolves. Zombie, soldier, pharaoh, cyborg, apocalypse survivor. Every record, new issue. Every tour, new arc. Fans didn't just recognize him. They tracked him. That's comic book behavior. Now rewind slightly. Kiss didn't create a mascot. They became the Mascots. The Demon. The Star Child. The Spaceman. The Catman. Meow. They leaned so hard into persona they crossed into actual comics. That's not merch. That's mythology. And once rock proved you could live inside a character, metal bands, they ran with it. All night long. Megadeth gives you Vic Rattlehead. Eyes wired shut. Ears capped. Mouth bolted. It's visual ideology. You don't need a lyric sheet to get it. That's graphic storytelling. Also, I think that's Mustaine's inner child. Motorhead Snaggletooth, that's a war comic antagonist that wandered onto a vinyl sleeve and never left. Chains, fangs, skull helmet. It's a logo, but it behaves like a character. And here's the pivot. Once fans were conditioned to follow illustrated identities, the jump from band mascot to licensed comic character, well, it wasn't that weird. It was logical. If Eddie can headline a cover, why not Judge Dredd? Why not full narrative crossover? That's when metal stopped borrowing comic energy and started writing it. By the mid-70s, metal wasn't just borrowing imagery, it was thinking in panels, in arcs, in storylines. Bands were no longer just playing songs, they were building worlds. And that starts with Alice Cooper. Alice Cooper didn't just shock, he staged morality plays. Executions, alter egos, villains and victims. Every tour a narrative, every album a serial arc. Comics had panels, Alice had stages. And in some cases, literal comic adaptations followed. The man and the character were separate, but inseparable. You could read a comic and watch a show, and the same story unfolded in different media. It's not just theatrical rock, it's graphic storytelling. The same instinct that makes a superhero leap from page to page makes a Cooper fan follow a stage execution from song to song. Wild stuff. Rob Zombie, Marilyn Manson picked up the threads decades later. Raised on Monster Mag's Grindhouse and underground comics, Zombie turned albums into illustrated worlds. Panels became riffs. Dialogue became samples. Every song was a scene, every album a graphic novel in motion. Yeah. Black Sabbath did it differently. No costumes, no mascots, just mythic dread, cosmic horror, and anti-heroes. If comics had existed for doom and apocalypse, this would have been their soundtrack. I am Iron Man. Motorhead's Snaggletooth is the perfect distilled example. Not a person, not a logo, a character in itself. A villain walks across album covers, snarling from page to stage. The lesson? Visuals and narrative aren't decoration. They are the story. And metal learned it fast. So by the late 70s and into the 80s, the line between comics and heavy music had all but vanished. Bands didn't just reference comics. They thought like comic writers. They staged like comic panels. They lived in the worlds they were creating. And once you understand that, the rest of the story, the honorable mentions, the mascots evolving into mythic personas, all falls into place. These are the honorable mentions. Some pretty cool bands, too. Beyond the mascot era and the graphic storytelling pioneers, a second wave of bands picked up the comic thread. Some leaned darker, some theatrical, some just weird. Gwar, grotesque sci-fi monsters on tour. Tool, visual allegories and philosophical comics in motion. Coheed and Cambria, literal sci-fi narrative arcs across albums and comics. Ghost, theatrical clergy, comic villain aesthetics. Slipknot, masks, characters, and chaos incarnate. And buried in the middle, just to remind you, ICP, horror comic sensibility, carnival grotesque, universe of their own making. Gorillas, illustrated avatars running the show. Type O negative. Vampire anti-heroes in every lyric and visual. My Chemical Romance, emo operas, narrative arcs, comic book melodrama. Nin, Nine Inch Nails, dystopian, cybernetic, cinematic, panel by panel, world building. Each of these bands didn't just make music, they constructed worlds, characters, villains, anti-heroes, everything borrowed from the logic of comics, pacing, stakes, visuals. And that leads us back to the personal story, where the story of Anthrax, I Am the Law, and Judge Dredd collide. When I picked up the I'm the Man cassette, I Am the Law was there. And there's this story about Judge Dredd, and of course I had to find out who he was. And that's what led me to the comic book store. Before we get lost in that 80s comic book store again, let's see what Anthrax actually did with I Am the Law and Judge Dredd. Because it wasn't just a song, it was a collision. Thrash metal guitars met comic book storytelling. Lyrics weren't just lyrics, they were dialogue, pacing, action panels in audio form. The riff punching like a panel beat, the bass line driving the story forward. Anthrax took a fictional lawman and made him a living sound. The Not Man mascot had his own chaos, sure, but here the lawman got his own anthem. It was absurd, it was fast, it was completely original. And the brilliance, the genius, was in the integration. You could hear the comic, you could see the music, and it made you want to chase it down. Vinyl, cassette, anything you could find. It wasn't just structure, it was presentation. Anthrax synced imagery, live performance, and audio storytelling. Album art and lyric sheets reinforced the comic energy. The Knot Man was chaos incarnate, but Dredd was order, and the contrast made it feel cinematic. Even in 1987, this kind of storytelling was rare. You didn't need Netflix, no cinematic tie-ins, no marketing push. It was pure fan immersion. You discovered it, you tracked it down, you lived it. And that's where innovation really hits. Anthrax created a bridge. Comic book character, thrash metal song, cultural experience. Each listen was flipping through the panels of a comic. Riff equals action. Lyric equals dialogue. Solo equals dramatic scene. It's why even today I Am the Law stands as more than a track. It's a miniature comic in sound form. And it made you want more. More music, more comics, more chaos. Not. The chase to find that song mirrors the same obsession a comic fan feels flipping through back issues. Every cassette store, every corner comic shop. You're tracking the narrative, piecing together the world. Anthrax didn't just pay homage to Judge Dredd. They expanded the universe in their way through thrash. It was fast, loud, it was obsessive, and it demanded attention. That obsession, chasing worlds, chasing stories, chasing music, that's exactly what took me back to the comic book store. I Am the Law and Judge Dredd weren't just songs or comics. They were maps. And somewhere in that chaos, you found your own adventure, waiting. Eventually I grew out of comics, not because they stopped being cool, I just stopped tracking the storylines. Stopped collecting like a crazy person, basically. But music never really left me. And the thing is, comics never really did either. They've been sneaking in, showing up in riffs, album art, concepts, even in my dreams. I'm even collecting them again. Always lurking, always ready to remind me worlds collide in the weirdest, most beautiful ways. I Am the Law. Not. So yeah, that's how a kid obsessed with tapes and comics learned two things. 1, metal and comics are basically soulmates. And 2, I'm the Law still makes me want to jump on a skateboard in the living room and punch a riff into the universe. I Am the Law. Not.
She burns the realm of your dreams. She burns the realm of your dreams.